tonight on Life on the Rock. We have Marcel LeJeune, part 1. He'll give a reflection and much more. Welcome to Life on the Rock. Tonight, our guest is Marcel LeJeune. He's president and founder of Catholic Missionary Disciple. We're going to do 2 shows with Marcel, and this first show is about the basics of evangelization.
He's going to share his own story of evangelization and how he got involved in college and how he's brought that message of evangelization out to other places. We're now going to a reflection with Marcel.
Okay, so names before numbers. Let me tell you a little something about the way we evangelize. We have to think about names before we think about numbers. If Jesus was walking around today, he'd be more worried about Peter and Andrew and James and John than he would be about the thousands who would listen to him preach. Now, does that mean he's not worried about the 3,000 or the 4,000 over here? No, he is. But before those numbers come into play, it's the people who are in front of him, the ones he spent a deep amount of time with, those like Mary and Martha and Lazarus. He knew their names. He cared for them. He loved them. He wept over Lazarus. He went after Peter even after he fell and deeply invested in these people because people are worthy of our time. Individuals are not a waste. And yes, it's a little inefficient, if you will, to be somebody who wants to reach so many and yet invest in just a handful. But that's how our Lord did it. And if it was good enough for Jesus Christ, it's got to be good enough for you and me. Because the Lord not only reveals his goodness in the words he says, he not only reveals the truth in the words, he reveals through his actions in his life. And his actions in his life tell us he deeply invested in a handful of people and he taught them to go do the same thing. So what about you today? Who can you invest in? Names before numbers, because it's worth it for you and me.
Marcel, welcome to Life on the Rock.
Thank you for having me, Brother John.
And you're the founder of Catholic Missionary Disciple, and you do a lot of work with forming disciples, but just in evangelization, particularly in the parishes, a lot with the campuses, college campuses. In Texas,
yes,
our home state.
That's right, Texas.
Yeah, so you went to A&M.
I did.
You're a graduate from there, and spent a number of years at Texas A&M College. You really built up, or helped contribute to building up the Catholic campus over there, which I want to learn more about. But also you spent some time out in Texas Tech.
Yeah.
Out west.
And all over Texas.
All over
the
Texas.
Great country of Texas, that's right.
We're both a little bit from San Antonio area.
That's right,
too,
yeah.
So cool.
Went to high school in San Antonio, so I've been all over.
Tell me a little bit about your own kind of backstory of how did you connect to faith first off?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting because my parents grew up in South Louisiana. That's why I have such a French name. So I'm Cajun. My dad went into the Navy, but before that, he grew up in a really small town in South Louisiana, which is, you could say, was probably the most Catholic part of the country in some ways.
Is that Lafayette?
Just not too far away, but in the diocese, actually. So he grew up in a tiny little town, and 90% of the people who were there were Catholic, and 90% of the Catholics went to church. And so you kind of just absorbed it by osmosis. He grew up loving Jesus. He grew up loving the faith. My mom, in a little bit bigger city, but kind of the same way, they just absorbed it, right? Yeah. My dad goes away to college, first one to go away to college, ends up living in the student center at the University of Louisiana Lafayette, and he wins Catholic Youth of the Nation from the U.S. bishops. Who knew that even existed, right? But I remember finding this award on his wall one time. So he wins that. He goes into seminary for a couple of years. He actually used to come evangelize in this part of the country before EWTN, before there was a Catholic church even in this area, in the summers during college with a missionary priest who would then go and try to figure out, should we start a parish there? So my dad and my mom have these strong Catholic roots. The problem was generationally, you know, we're coming out of, you know, this turmoil after Vietnam and all this other stuff in the 70s and then going into the early 80s, which is, I grew up in the 70s and 80s, and it was a weird time in the church as well in the United States. And I struggled. And for the 5 of us who were kids in my household growing up, we left the faith before we left the home.
Wow,
we just didn't believe.
Yeah.
So I go away to college, and I'm not going to church. I don't even know where the church is, brother. I had no idea where this thing was. And then finally some guys who lived in the dorm not too far from me, they said, you know what you could use? You could use God. So I said, okay, and I went to church, and I had this huge conversion where I knew that God loved me, and I started walking with the Lord. I met my wife that same night, which was awesome.
Now, what made you open? Because sometimes if you come from a faith background and you walk away, and then somebody, approaches you with God, sometimes they're like, yeah, kind of been there, done that, I know the ropes, so to speak. But again, there has to be kind of like a reset button. But what kind of drew you back into it? What was that maybe pushing element?
The first thing was the witness of the men who invited me.
Really?
Half of them were Baptist, half of them were Catholic, and they just really had a lot of fun together, but they weren't doing the normal college student thing, chasing girls or drinking too much or anything. They just wanted to do the right thing, and they did it. They had a lot of fun, and they smiled and they laughed, and they were interesting and smart, and I wanted to be with them. I wanted to be like them. And so that was the first thing. The second thing was they could have long conversations about things that mattered, and I didn't have any kind of foundation to rest upon. So that interested me as well and opened me up to all of these existential questions that kind of haunt everybody. The thing, who am I?
Yeah.
Is there truth? Is there goodness? Is there a God? How do I know this, et cetera? And so I think my heart started to open to that, and then it was like, well, where do I find it? And I thought I should give this Catholic thing at least a shot.
Yeah.
And I did, and then I experienced this movement of my heart after God's grace, especially in the sacrament of confession, where for the first time, all that guilt I'd carried around kind of got flushed, and then I was free to say, I want more of you, God, and I invited the Lord into my life. But then I think after that, it was the community that built me up. Because I was going to Texas A&M. I didn't have friends that went to church at the time.
Yeah.
But at church, I found men and women who loved the Lord as well, who loved the Catholic Church and wanted us to all do it together. And I think that's kind of the Christian thing, right? We're supposed to do it as church. And we did, and we did it well, and it was great. It was a lot of fun.
That's interesting you bring that up, because sometimes when you go off, you kind of get into this isolation mode where everything's kind of on your own, and you kind of got to put just extra work, even just to go to Mass. And it's just something that's just enjoyable if you don't know anybody. And I think, again, I've experienced that too in college, where you just kind of feel alone. It's just me and my faith. But where's the bigger, I know there's people out there, but how do you really tap into or connect to a community? Yeah,
I think there's a couple things. One is the community has a responsibility to reach out who aren't a part of the community. This is where maybe you could say a growing edge for the Catholic Church is right now, because we struggle still with that hospitality aspect, with outreach, with evangelization of those who don't come to us. Because our culture, if you will, within the Catholic Church says we open our doors at our parish, our Catholic center, our diocese, wherever it is, and we wait for people to come to us.
We're waiting for walk-ons.
Yes, exactly. We're waiting for people. We're waiting for customers. We're waiting for people to show up in the door. And that's just not the way the Christian community was built upon in the apostolic ages, or in the great movements of the saints, or the times of renewal we find in France or in Asia or South America. We went to those people who didn't go to church, right? We went to the people who were pagans, who never knew about this one God, much less Jesus, who is God. And so I think there's this, we've kind of lost it in the United States, or in the West in general, this mission orientation that we're supposed to go. So there's that aspect, and then there's the person who's seeking or looking for something more. And maybe they want community, and it takes a little bit of guts, right? And so one of the things I teach people is, whether you're on this side or this side, you have to learn to initiate if you really want community and relationship. And that goes for our prayer life, right? We want to have a relationship with the Lord, first of all. He's already initiated with us. God always acts first, right? But our job's to respond, right? And so we have to choose to do that. But in terms of human relationships, since God's already initiated with us, we have to go initiate with others if we're going to be like God, right? And he models for us that way of going. And that's something we still need to grow into quite a bit.
Absolutely. Now, I want to kind of go back to your story. Whenever you were realizing faith, did you notice too like a shift in career or kind of that desire of what you wanted to do in life? I don't know what you were studying before. Was there kind of like a revelation, so to speak, in that?
Yeah, it didn't come till later. So I knew I wanted to marry this girl who I fell in love with, and I knew I wanted to make money.
Okay.
Now, that's not unlike most guys in college and their experience, right? Guys in success and money and these kind of things. And there's nothing wrong with any of that, right? I mean, I fell in love. We got married right out of school, and I started working a couple of different jobs. She had more of a plan. She wanted to go be a social worker, so she went to get her master's in social work. We moved to Austin, Texas. I was working at a Fortune 500 company at the time, but I was doing lower management kind of stuff, and we didn't see each other very much. So I quit my job and decided, okay, well, maybe I'll explore going back to school. And then I got an 8 to 5 job rather than a crazy hour job. And in the midst of that exploration, I thought, I'm going to go get an MBA and make more money. But I felt a deep calling. That's not what I want of you. And so maybe it was theology. So I went and sat in some classes at the University of Dallas for a master's program in theological studies. And I remember sitting in one of those classes, and it was almost like the angels started singing. Oh, it's like one of those moments of great revelation. This is where you're supposed to be. And it was just a beautiful moment, a grace-filled moment where that call became really firmed up right there in that moment. And I knew I'm going to get my master's. I don't know if I'll ever work in apostolate or in the ministry or for anything else, but this is what he's calling me to right now. So I got my master's first. That was the first step.
Well, we have to go to a break, but whenever we come back, let's get more into the evangelization.
Awesome.
Well, Marcel, hearing your story kind of reminded me of my own just in college, because that was during a time in my life when I really started to reconnect with the faith. And as that was happening, I just remember there was a thought in my mind. I'm studying business, but as I'm doing that, I'm like, I'm not happy. But there was another thought in my mind that all I want to do is share faith.
Yeah.
How do you do that? How do you bring what I've received to others?
Yeah.
And I think along a very similar line, you experienced that yourself. And you go kind of back into the whole college world, which I think is a great kind of battleground, because there's just so many different ideas and just people coming together for the first time that have never known each other.
Yeah.
It's kind of a new start in life. How did you get back into the college setting?
Yeah, so what happened to me is that after that time of formation in grad school and doing a lot of volunteer work at the parish level, I found I had some gifts. And some of the gifts I found were, I had a charism for teaching, for leadership, for intercessory prayer, and for prophecy. Now, prophecy, of course, is telling people what God wants them to hear, not necessarily telling the future, right?
Yeah.
So, and I found that when I used those charisms that God had given me, just, something else that was kind of stuck in my own heart came unstuck, that the Lord was really working in those places. And so I had some talent and I had some gifts, but where do you want me to lead? And I think in my discernment, there was a great piece about, well, let's just see if you can do this and support your family. And I ended up working at Texas Tech, at St. Elizabeth's Catholic Center, and running the campus ministry there for 4 years, and absolutely fell in love with it. Absolutely fell in love with it, because that was just where my gifts and my talents and my charisms came out. But also because I was receiving back as well, just as much as I would give. The Lord was just planting grace upon grace in my heart. And then from there, my sister had gotten cancer, and there were some other things that had happened, and I got a phone call, and it was another grace-filled moment. And a priest who was a good friend of mine who was running the campus ministry at Texas A&M. He had been there for about 6 months, and he called me and said, I can't do this by myself. It's too much for me to handle. I know you've got experience. Would you come do this? Well, that moved us 4 hours closer to my sister and family, who was in San Antonio.
Okay.
And for those of you who don't know Texas geography, it's closer. So I moved closer, and then I get this opportunity to go back to my alma mater, and it's starting to, flower a little bit. It's much bigger than it used to be, and just a lot of opportunity. And it was just wonderful. Spent 11 years there, working in the campus ministry, and still love it to this day. Still a parishioner at St. Mary's Catholic Centers. Yeah. And now we've got 500 kids in OCIA.
See, that's amazing.
We had to build a new church that seats 1,500 and costs tens of millions of dollars, and it's just absolutely gorgeous too. Just gorgeous. You can do new churches and make them gorgeous. Yeah. And it's just fruit upon fruit. We've got vocations. I mean, even when I was there, we were getting 12 to 15 vocations a year to the religious life and priesthood. It's just this place where I think community and the sacraments and prayer and discernment and all these things kind of come together, but also the evangelization piece, right? We would go on campus and talk to people about, tell me what's going on in your life. And then if we got the opportunity, enter into a conversation about religion and faith and things that matter. And we'd ask people if we could pray for them. And it started changing people. And then we want to send those students out to go do that in their parishes, right?
Was the culture different between Texas Tech and Texas A&M?
They're similar in some ways. I mean, size, A&M is significantly larger.
Right, A&M is a huge
A&M
school.
is one of the biggest schools in the country.
I don't know how many students, but it's up there.
It's massive. And so that's part of it too. I mean, there's also a higher percentage of Catholics in that part of Texas, at Texas A&M. And just a longer history of success. Now, Texas Tech has taken off in their campus ministry. This is one of the great things about campus ministry around the country right now, is that we see Catholic campus ministries at secular universities across the country are flourishing. Now, flourishing is a different definition for each place, right? Because you've got your own, things that are going to go well and some things that are going to be hindrances, but they're starting to flourish. You're seeing all this fruitfulness that's coming out of it. And there's a number of reasons for that, but it's just wonderful to see also that we're setting up these young people to be lifelong successful Catholics who go back to their parish and are invested in them, but not just in their parish. We have to think of it. Catholics are sent on mission, right? We're supposed to be on mission. That is, to those people who never come to our churches, right? And that's I think still a weak point, but I think this younger generation who's kind of got their arms around, there's something more that I got to do to go get that person who doesn't go to church, my friend who is at work and has never heard of Jesus, or somebody else.
Because part of missionary discipleship it isn't just I've converted this person and you check it off.
No.
But the idea is you've brought somebody to Christ who in turn is going to spread the message and make another disciple, and that person's going to go on and make another disciple. There's like a chain reaction effect.
Yeah.
It multiplies.
Absolutely, and that's the way it should be, right? That if we know that Jesus spent 74% of his time investing in 12 men in those 3 years of ministry. I'm going to say that again. 74% of the recorded time in the 4 Gospels when he was in his ministry was spent with 12 men. So he deeply invested for 3 years in these men, and then he taught them to go do the exact same thing with other men. And we know that St. John had, these others who followed him, like St. Ignatius of Antioch, who invested in Origen and Irenaeus, and it went down through. We know St. Paul had Timothy and Titus, and St. Peter had Mark and others. So we see it going from, in a sense, spiritual generation to spiritual generation to spiritual generation, and it spreads by doing that. It's not just we run a program for a little while, and then people come and they're fed a little bit and they learn something, and then they go back to their homes and nothing really changes. We allow the Lord to come into my heart, into my life, and into our community, and he's the one who spurs us to say, if he's really true, and if heaven and hell are true, and if this grace of the sacraments is true, how could I not want everybody else to know this?
Yeah.
If heaven's on the line, how could I not share that with other people? So that's it's not just a negative thing, it's a positive thing. We want to take as many people as possible with us when we go to heaven.
Yeah.
So let's go out there and do a little bit better job of doing that. And I think once that mindset happens, it's not just an activity that we do, it's a lifestyle. That discipleship and our missionary discipleship should be wedded one in the other.
Yeah.
And another thing I would say is, I think a lot of people spiritually in their own prayer life are missing an aspect of depth that comes from being fruitful in their evangelization.
Yeah. And I think too, the Gospels really don't make sense until you really start living out that life of evangelization.
Absolutely.
That's a part of it, to where a lot of these stories and parables that Jesus, preaches and teaches all of a sudden resonates. You go, oh, yes. It clicks in a very different way. But what do you see, just quickly, what do you see people hungering most for these days?
Right now, I would say it's really two things. One is kind of something solid. The world out there is just so one thing, then the next thing, and the next thing, and nothing's really true, and is it true, whatever. They want something solid. Where can I plant my flag? This is true and good and beautiful and right, and I know it. Okay. And the other thing is, I think, community. And I think the church has this thing, like the solid and the true and the good and the beautiful, really, we got it. We're really good at this. I think at the local level, we probably have quite a bit of improvement still to make. But I think where you find it, even if it's just a handful of people, and you find those deep friends where you can go and walk with each other to the Lord and do these things together, I think it just makes such a difference.
Well, Marcel, we've run out of time, but this is also a first part of a two-part episode.
Yeah.
So thank you for being on Life on the Rock.
Yeah.
Wow, what a great show. He's got a lot to say. He says it beautifully. Something that struck me was talking about our spiritual lives have to have that missionary depth to it.
Yeah.
I remember Mother Angelica telling us, when you're flying, you're in an airport, just don't sit in the chair, talk to people, put yourself out there, try to reach out to other people.
Yeah, and one thing that I connected with his story was during his time at college, just the authentic witness of other Christians and their faith and how that really impacted him. I think you even have a similar story of your experience in college. It was just somebody ministering to you, just giving that witness of faith. And I think to see it in something very authentic when it's lived out, and a lot of times we can make that quick discernment of what's authentic and what's not. And it's very impactful, but just to be mindful of that too.
I was struck too. They have 500 students in OCIA at Texas A&M. 500 are becoming Catholic. And you wonder if maybe this experience of going through COVID and the isolation has really been a trigger for this, that prompted people to want some kind of, certainly I think they're searching for, like as he said, the solidity, the true, the good, the beautiful, and the Catholic Church has tradition, but also community. They're looking for community. They're tired of the isolation. It's not fulfilling. And we got to provide that. As Catholics, we need to think of ways to do that. We don't do it as well as some of our mega churches. Brothers and sisters are doing it very well. So we got to think along those lines.
And the faith, it isn't something that's static, but as his book that he has written, The Contagious Catholic, it is something, faith is very contagious in that regard, that you want to share it with all those around it, because it's a good thing, not in the disease sense, but just something that, people see there's an authentic happiness there. There's something that's very self-fulfilling, in our purpose. And again, our identity is bound to God. And whenever we lose that, we just kind of go by the wayside very quickly.
Brother John, you had a great line in that the interview where you said, we just can't just wait for the walk-ons.
Right, yeah.
Does Nick Saban, he goes to the people's homes.
He's a big recruiter, yeah.
He talks to the grandparents, the cousins, the uncles.
Got to know the uncle, yeah.
Yeah, so we need to think in a different way, maybe in a more aggressive way or inventive way that's really reaching out. We just can't, as Pope Francis said, we just can't wait for people to come to us. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, we'll send you that video with a blessing. May the Holy Spirit shine upon you and fill your heart with strength and courage and new ideas and initiatives to spread the faith wherever you're at, wherever He has placed you. May God bless you, the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. We'll see you next week on Life on the Rock.